talking Illinois high school football.
If your goals are as high as you talk about, tonight's the night you go out and just take one more step.
It's a view from the West.
And it starts right now!
Welcome back to View from the West podcast. I'm your host, Greg Armstrong, joined once again, as always, by Mitch Stormer. Mitch, I was in DeKalb to see Lena-Winslow, the 1A state champions, back-to-back state champions in Class 1A. You were watching on TV. You were watching all weekend long, keeping everybody up to date on Twitter. Great job on that end, by the way. It was fantastic. I was following along like everybody else. So job well done. But Mitch, what a weekend of high school football. It was great to have state championships back again after we missed out on it, for so long.
Yeah, let alone, having a team that we follow playing for one, but just having it in general. We talk about it a lot on the show, that how special of a time playoffs are. And then when it all kind of culminates to this weekend, this 2-day weekend of 8 games for, the best teams in Illinois. A special every year. And this year was no different. All 8 games were a lot of fun, exciting football. But again, obviously our attention was focused on the first game on Friday morning.
Yeah. So Lena-Winslow gets the win 38-25 over Carrollton. They are back-to-back state champions, as we referenced. Mitch, we'll get into that game. We'll do a little bit of a breakdown on every game 1 through 8A. We'll talk about the highlights, the players, the things that stood out to us as we watched throughout the weekend. Before we get into all that, I do want to give a plug for, if you haven't heard it yet, go back and listen to our state championship Instant Reacts podcast. We were joined by Kyle Kampmeyer from NUICfootball.com and my intern for the day, my dad, Rick Armstrong, joined us for the View from the West Instant Reacts podcast. We got done with covering the game. We got the post-game reaction. And then me and Kyle and my dad walked off the sidelines and hit record and just kind of started talking about what stood out to us in the game. It's great to get his perspective from the Northwest Upstate Illini. His depth of knowledge on that conference is amazing. So, just to get kind of his thoughts as he, walked off and saw another state championship. And man, you could tell like he takes extreme pride. And when schools from the NUIC come out with that win, like he's loving it. And I can't blame him, because it's a ton of fun for that area, for all those communities, especially for Lena-Winslow, obviously, but for all the teams in the conference to see another win from that conference, another notch in the belt, it's just a huge accomplishment.
Yeah, obviously, and we'll get into the history of what this means for the conference and what this means for Lena. And yeah, like you said, Kyle does a great job. And I imagine he did have a lot of fun, sitting in a press box when it was 22 degrees outside. So, I do imagine he enjoyed watching this one from the high rises. So, yeah, if you're going to watch a team win, you might as well do it in style.
Yep. He was down there at the end. He came down at the end, and his wife was walking the sideline taking photos. So he gave big credit to her, because she was roaming the sidelines, getting the photos for NUICfootball.com. So, overall, just a ton of fun to be there. And Mitch, we'll break it down. We'll start. Lena-Winslow gets the 38-25 win, like we said. And Mitch, how about give me the nugget that you learned about not just Lena-Winslow getting to the state championship game, but literally how they get to the state championship game. I love this.
Yeah. So this came from Twitter. A follower of ours, his name is Sean Knox. He's actually a coach at Athens for football and baseball. He had said that let me bring this back. I believe it was Steve Susi who had tweeted out something like, insert Marey Roby does everything but drive the bus sort of, comment. And then Sean Knox responded like, well, actually, so he found Lena's bus driver at the game. And unfortunately, I don't have his name. It wasn't tweeted out, so I don't have that. But Sean said that he spoke to the bus driver who has driven Lena to all 5 of their state championship games. How cool is that?
Yeah, that's awesome. Hey, the old adage, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, So
well, and sometimes if you don't have that available, you might hire out a contractor company, a company driver who doesn't know you from Adam, but to have the same bus driver who maybe he, buses for the school and had those kids for a long time. So hard to say, but either way, 11 years of driving the team to state championships. That's a nice lucky charm to have, maybe.
Yeah. So Mitch, let's get into the game here. Lena would get out to a 6-0 lead. Jake Zeal bust through for a 60-yard run. Really impressive the way he kind of broke through the line and he was gone. That puts him up 6-0. But things got interesting from there. Lena, uncharacteristically, 3 first half turnovers. They actually fumbled on their first drive of the game.
Yep.
They scored the Jake Zeal touchdown, which we just referenced. They then have an interception in the red zone, might have been right in the end zone.
It was.
And then they also had a fumbled punt, muffed punt that Carrollton then recovered. They ended up being down 7-6. They were still right in the game, but certainly this gave all the momentum to Carrollton at that point. But man, when Lena-Winslow is looking for a spark, look no further than Marey Roby. Mitch, he took over this game. It was impressive.
Yeah, well, we were just laughing before we hit record that there were 43 points scored altogether in the second quarter. And for a while there, watching on TV, and I was doing some other things. I was washing dishes, things in the kitchen, recovering from Thanksgiving, and I couldn't take my eyes away from the game because it seemed like there was a score every possession, and there really was. Looking at the timestamps of when teams scored. 9:51 left in the second quarter, 7:57 left, 7:41 left, 2:18 left, 1:54 left. So, and even when Roby scored again with a minute left. So, yeah, the second quarter was just bonkers, and it really set this game apart. And like you said, those 3 turnovers were uncharacteristic, and really not to take away from what Carrollton was doing, but it really was the only thing that kept them in that game early on. That interception did come in the end zone. On their very first possession, like you referenced, that fumble, Lena was in the end zone, in the red zone there too. So that's 2 red zone turnovers right away that could have turned into scores. I don't remember. I think Carrollton did score off of that muffed punt. I don't remember exactly, but I'm pretty sure that they did. So yeah, if those hadn't happened, what would this game have looked like? And again, not taking anything away from Carrollton, because I thought that they really showed that they were a pretty good team. Grant Pullman was everything as advertised, but that second quarter and Marey Roby, like you referenced, was really just it was awesome to see.
Yeah, it was absolutely awesome to see. Awesome to cover, because when as a videographer, when you see him make that cut and he's running towards your sideline, towards where I'm standing, man, my eyes get wide open, because that's just the most exciting play when he's running right by you, and he did twice in 2 of those runs. Like I said, when they needed a spark, he absolutely took over. But on the opposite side, Pullman and Carrollton did not go away. I mean, you look at the scoring drives, and it was 14-7, then it was 14-13, then it was 22-13, then it was 22-19. Carrollton came right back and scored again. And it really wasn't until Roby scored the 3rd time on that 47-yard run to make it 30-19. Carrollton got the ball back, and who else but Marey Roby comes up with the interception before the half to close it out at 30-19. So even when it was going back and forth and you thought, man, Carrollton's not going away, I give him a bunch of credit. But once you got to that lead at halftime, you felt safe. You felt like if you're Lena-Winslow, you felt safe going into the half.
Yeah, and even despite being up 11 at the time, that interception almost kind of felt like a turning point, because not only did it stop Carrollton from scoring before the half, but Lena got the ball back to start the third quarter.
Yeah.
So again, with everything that happened, and it looked like the tides were turning towards Lena-Winslow, you never know if Carrollton would have scored on that drive. So that interception really did feel like that was the end. Really, I thought it was. Even when Carrollton came back and had that long drive to start the third quarter and they scored, still really never felt to me like it was in danger.
So what's really fascinating to me is Lena-Winslow, you said, got the ball at the beginning of the second half. They couldn't do anything. They could not capitalize. It's not until 4 minutes and 51 seconds left in the third quarter that Carrollton scores. And at that point, both teams had scored 4 touchdowns.
Yep.
The difference being the extra point or the 2-point conversion attempts that Lena-Winslow was able to get and that Carrollton did not. So that's what's funny to me is that they had scored the same amount of touchdowns, but the lead was 30-25 in favor of Lena-Winslow. But you really didn't feel like Lena was in danger.
Yeah. And that was the thing too, that was nice to see, because we talked about, I think it goes back to the Fulton game, the quarterfinal game where Lena really couldn't convert a 2-point conversion. And that was kind of a thing, like they were scoring so easily and they couldn't punch it in from 3 yards out. So, it was nice that they were able to figure that out. I mean, who else? It was Marey Roby, taking it in. And flip side of that, like you said, I know, I think it was Luke Benson intercepted a 2-point conversion for Carrollton once, that they stopped a run on another one. So yeah, it's those little things. And we'll talk about this a little bit more when we get to another game, that occurred over the weekend when we're talking about conversions and what they mean. But they add up. And like you said, they certainly did. Because when you get to that point in the third quarter, you scored the same amount of touchdowns, but it's still a 5-point difference.
Yep. So it was a 5-point difference at that point. Lena-Winslow did manage to come down to the beginning of the fourth quarter. Luke Benson punches it in from 1 yard out. Marey Roby goes in on the 2-point conversion. That would make it 38-25. That would end up being your final score, thanks to some defensive effort from Lena-Winslow. And that's where I want to talk about next, is that Lena-Winslow's defense showed up when they needed to. They were, the offensive turnovers didn't help them out in the beginning. And they were Carrollton was able to capitalize a couple times, but ultimately when they needed stops, they got the stops. What stood out to me was 2 big time plays, back-to-back plays from Brody Mann. He got a sack and another tackle for loss when they really needed it in the second half. Yep. And that was a huge turning point, I think, defensively for momentum in that second half to carry them to the victory.
Yeah, I remember what 2 plays you're talking about. And, up until that point, Pullman, Carrollton's quarterback, was really having his way a little bit. He had a couple long runs. I think one of his touchdowns was 60-some yards. And so, pretty good escapability. But you saw that one play that you're referring to where Mann was on a blitz and he went right through and got him from behind. And then they came up. I think they tried just an out pass into the flat, and he was right there. So, yeah, he was impressive. The whole, defensive unit, as they have been all year, I don't know that they got as much recognition as the offense did, which is not probably as fair as it should have been, because that unit was really good all season, really good when it mattered in this game. And not to take away from that defensive effort, Carrollton did have some mistakes. They had a lot of dropped passes in this game.
Yeah.
A couple in the end zone, or at least a couple that would have extended drives. Certainly in that last drive of the game, I saw at least 2 dropped passes that might have either gotten them some yardage or maybe even a first down. There was one in the first half that they dropped in the end zone. So again, things like that you can't have, but Lena was there regardless.
Yeah, looking at Brody Mann's numbers on the defensive side of the ball, 8 total tackles. He had a sack. He had 4 tackles for loss, totaling 19 yards. It just felt like he was all over the field. And, we saw flashes of that throughout the season. Certainly, we saw him show up week in and week out. I saw it firsthand in the Fulton game, in the quarterfinal game too, just where, he would come from out of nowhere, out of my camera shot, just fly into the picture and make the tackle. He did that several times in this game as well. So just a great effort from him. Mitch, I think what I loved about it is that in the 1A game, most of the time you're seeing the guys making plays on defense. I referenced this in the Instant Reacts podcast too. The guys making plays on defense are usually some of your best offensive players. And, you're usually outshadowing their defensive efforts because how good they are in offense. I love that Brody Mann is a defensive first guy, and it seems like he really took pride in it. I mean, he took pride on being kind of that go-to guy on their defensive side of the ball, and he led him to a state championship.
Yeah. Conversely, too, I thought that same way with Luke Benson, who only threw 1 pass in this game.
Yep.
And I think he should get a lot more credit as that quarterback. Running a wishbone offense is not easy. and because a lot of their scoring plays, they seem to be on either counters or traps or something that might have been play action, or he might have reversed his feet in a certain way. So one, he should get a lot more credit on that end, even though the numbers might not show it. But defensively, I thought for a couple of drives in the first half that he was going to get an interception, because he was right there, whether it was guarding their all-state receiver in Kyle Leonard, or their other receiver, I believe his name was Gus Coonrod. And then he ended up coming up with that interception on the 2-point conversion. So effort like that, whether you're playing both ways, whether you're defensive first, you saw that a lot in this game.
Yeah. So we've talked about Marey Roby. He's the MVP of the game. Trying to pull up his stats, his numbers here real quick.
27 carries for 241 yards and 3 scores.
Yeah, just crazy. I mean, to show up on the biggest stage is, I think that's what's so impressive, is that, the moment called for somebody to step up, and he's the guy. I mean, he's the guy they turn to, and his postseason, when you can really see that he turned that corner and maybe getting back to darn near close to 100% coming off a pretty tough injury.
Yep.
His numbers are remarkable in this postseason.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was such a good way to see. And we talked about it before, where, Lena was kind of in uncharted territory where they were coming in with 2 losses, and then they played Aurora Christian. And that was when, I don't remember Roby's stats that game, but it was right then that you thought, okay, maybe they're back. And they did it for the next, 4 or 5 games, 5 games, I guess it was. So yeah, it was such an impressive performance from him. I think he was over 200 at half, maybe. I might be getting that wrong. And not to take away from, what else they did. Jake Zeal, obviously he had that long touchdown run. He ended up with 127 yards on the ground. Gage Dunker, who's a sophomore, who I think is probably going to be taking the load, now that some of these guys are starting to graduate, really capped off the game, because he was their ball carrier on, I think they only ran 2 plays on their very last possession around the clock. And he converted a first down for him. I think it was like a 3rd and 8 maybe. So, really just impressive. When you don't have any passing yards, and you win a game like this, you can look at your rushing yards, and when you see that they put up 452, it starts to add up pretty quick. So this was a classic Lena-Winslow game.
Yeah, and we named a lot of them, but go through the list: Jake Zeal, Gage Dunker, Brady Ilders, Ethan Fye. Those guys all were contributing in the backfield, whether it was in the state championship game, in the playoffs, or throughout the regular season. It was for different times in the year. It was a committee, and Ethan Fye led the way for a long time, and Marey Roby stepped in and kind of led the way in the playoffs. And either way, no matter how you did it, you get to the state championship, and credit to those guys. What I thought was really cool was in the post game, couple of reporters were asking Marey Roby about, had he talked to his brother. Ravion Valentine was the running back in 2017, was the big, go-to back who ended up playing at Northern Illinois and has now stepped out of a playing role and more into like a strength coaching role within the program still. So he's still at Northern Illinois. Hearing Marey talk about, those phone calls that he would have with Ravion before the game is so cool, to know that older brother is giving him notes on things he sees on film, or, just little tips and tricks. And from a kid, from a guy who's been there, who's done that. It's so cool. And Mitch, tell me about, this story, that they're not the only brothers. It's a whole family of brothers now that have been through Lena-Winslow winning state titles.
Yeah, so there was an article from the Rockford Register-Star. I believe it came out today. It might have came out yesterday, but either way, I read it. You read it today. But with Marey and his 3 brothers, they now have 6 championships between them. All for Lena. Roby had this year in 2019. Ravion had 2017. Bobby Brown had 2017. And then Ronnie Valentine was in 2017 and 2019. So 6 titles, but 5 team titles, but a couple of those overlapped.
Yep.
And they're all brothers, a part of a large adopted family from Dan and Teresa Brown of Lena. So what an amazing story. and now that they don't have any more to play, that is the end of the line. So that is a pretty cool way to go out to accomplish that with your brothers and with that family.
Yeah, in talking to Marey Roby after the game, seems like a great kid. Seems like very genuine. I'm really curious to see where he ends up. I mean, loads of talent, but just because of the way the COVID year hit, on top of the fact that then he was injured during that year, I think that he's, hasn't had the chance to really show his skills. So yeah, I hope that there's a college coach out there that, man, they can see that this is a dynamic athlete that you could use somewhere on a football field at some level of college football. So, and plenty of other players, on this Lena team that, I hope they get the chance to the next level if that's what they want to do, because, they've played at a very high level in Class 1A here to come away with 2 state titles. A lot of them have. So credit to Lena-Winslow. It was a lot of fun to be there, walking the sidelines, and Lena-Winslow brought a great fan base. They were loud. They were into it. So, huge credit to the Lena-Winslow Panthers community, for coming out in full force. Just a ton of fun. Mitch, they're back-to-back state champions. They've now won 5 state championships in 11 seasons.
Yep.
In 11 playoff seasons, they won 5 state championships. The NUIC has won every state championship in Class 1A going back to 2016.
Mm-hmm.
So that's split between Lena and Forreston. So just remarkable what this conference continues to do. And it almost continues to top itself, year in and year out. And so, hey, I'm not going to lie. I'm already excited for next year and seeing, I think Lena-Winslow is going to be right there in the mix, but where does Forreston fall in, and what's Galena have coming back? And, Dupec, obviously in the 3A level, it's exciting. It's a lot of exciting stuff year in and year out. This conference always produces at a high level late in the season.
Yeah, a little too early to do our 2022 previews. But I think a lot of teams are going to look a lot differently. I think, especially with this Lena team, it was very, senior driven, but they played a lot of underclassmen too for experience. So, and regardless what the team is going to look like or what the conference is going to look like, it still holds true that the 1A title goes through the NUIC, and it is theirs until someone can take it.
Yep, absolutely. So like we had already referenced, if you want to go back and hear more about the Class 1A state championship game, go back and listen to our Instant Reacts podcast, the state championship edition from Friday afternoon, literally right after we walked off the sideline. Go check that out if you haven't already.
Well, and too, if you're more of a highlight person, just go to our Twitter feed, and I think the pinned tweet is the highlights that you would put together. So if you haven't seen the game yet and can't find a replay of it, Greg's got the condensed version with all the scores for Lena-Winslow, and it's a really nice tape for us to have and for the team to share. So that's a job well done on your part.
Well, thank you, Mitch. Before we move into the rest of the classes, I do want to make a quick programming note. We're going to take next week off. Next week's going to be a bye week for us.
Yep.
We'll be back strong in 2 weeks. And we're going to do our Best from the West awards in 2021.
Yep.
Mitch, I'm guessing that Marey Roby will be somewhere in the discussion in some of that, in that podcast.
Yeah, if we've got a player of the year, which I imagine that we will, boy, you've got competition with Roby, with Matthew Bailey from with Moline, Easton Schischler from A-Town. So there's going to be a lot of discussion that we're going to have to go through if we're going to have to narrow it down to that, because another great year of great talent in the area that we cover. And we'll try our best to sum it up the best way we can.
Well, Mitch, let's go through the rest of the state championship games. I got to be honest. I don't want to go in order because I think we got to start in Class 6A.
Okay.
Cary Grove gets the upset win over East St. Louis, 37-36. Mitch, I had a chance to take in a lot of this game.
Yeah.
And I thought it was going to be the most intriguing matchup that we saw in the weekend. And I think it proved to be right. Cary Grove comes away with what some said is the biggest upset in a state championship game ever in history. I don't know that I have the context at my hands right now to really say yes or no.
Right.
But somebody's out there saying it. So that is a huge win for Cary Grove.
Well, and just take it back to the beginning of the year, because Cary Grove was, first of all, they were the top ranked team in 6A in this bracket. So that's why it's hard to say it was a bit of an upset without context. But
Yeah.
they were also the number one team at the beginning of the year in 6A, until it was decided that East St. Louis was going to play 6A. There was some discussion if they were going to go to 7. I think there might have been a discussion if they were going to play 5 or 8. Maybe it went the other way. But either way, once it landed on that they were going to play 6, Cary Grove just automatically got shoved down to the second spot. And East St. Louis, did what they did. They played somewhat of a nationwide schedule, going to Florida and California, and then took care of the rest. So they get a 4 seed, and you see this game and you see, well, yeah, the 1 seed beat the 4 seed, but it's not that simple, because this East St. Louis team is loaded with D1 players that will absolutely be playing on Saturdays. And it goes to show what type of team Cary Grove had to really pull this one off.
Yeah, well, Mitch, when you go through the game, I mean, it was back and forth to start this one out. Luther Burden III, who is a name we talked about last week, Mizzou commit, just unbelievable football player. He is, dangerous at all times. And I know, from hearing post-game comments, Cary Grove knew they had to key on him. They had to do anything they could to slow him down or stop him. And early in the game, it looked like that was going to be, as hard as advertised. He has a 53-yard touchdown reception to quickly make it 8-0. Cary Grove comes back and scores to make it 8-8. East St. Louis then bounces back on their next drive. They score to make it 14-8. Back we go. Cary Grove scores 15-14. They take a lead. So at this point, neither team has been stopped.
And that was just the first quarter.
Yes, they're going back and forth. Neither team can stop one another. East St. Louis goes up 20-15. Cary Grove comes back, goes up 23-20. This is where things get interesting.
Yep.
23-20 with 3 minutes, 58 seconds left in the second quarter. And out of nowhere, they go out with an onside kick attempt, and they get it. They catch East St. Louis off guard, get an onside kick. They then march down and score to make it 30-20. And that's the score at halftime.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a huge turning point in this game, because they knew they were struggling to slow down East St. Louis, but also East St. Louis was struggling to slow them down.
Right.
So they break out this onside kick and get it and build a 10-point lead. So now we go to the third quarter, and here he is again, Burden the third, a 12-yard touchdown pass. That makes it 30-28. But Cary Grove comes back in the fourth quarter. Nick Hissong, a 9-yard touchdown run to make it 37-28. And at this point, you're thinking, Cary Grove, they might pull this off. Not so fast. Not so fast, Mitch. Because again, Luther Burden III, on every kickoff that Cary Grove did, they kicked away from him. They kicked to the opposite side of the field. In the fourth quarter, in what ended up being the last kickoff of the game, they do again. They kick away from him. Burden runs across the field, grabs the ball himself. And in the post-game interviews, he basically said, that was not something that was designed. It wasn't called by a coach. I just knew I had to make a play. So, give credit to a playmaker who just kind of seized a moment. Sure enough, he runs it back 80 yards. I mean, what a dynamic weapon, that this East St. Louis team has.
Yep.
So that makes it 37-36. Cary Grove drives downfield. They fumble on a fourth down to give it back to East St. Louis. East St. Louis has a couple penalties that would set them back, but they still look like they were going to march downfield. They had a big sack in the very next play, or no, I'm sorry. They had a pass completion, and then they had pressure on the quarterback for East St. Louis. Cary Grove put pressure on him. As he's being wrapped up, I think East St. Louis's quarterback trying to make a play. Yeah. It's Robert Battle. I believe Pops is the name he goes by. Trying to make a play, tries to scramble out of the sack, throws a wild pass right into the arms of a Cary Grove defender. I believe Nick Riley was the name of the defender waiting. Mitch, he's a tight end that they threw in on that play. He only played one defensive snap all game. Unbelievable.
It's Noah Riley.
Okay.
And yeah, that's again, what more could you ask for, right? He had one reception during the game, and then they threw him in on defense as just trying to get athletes on the field, just trying to be able, make sure you can cover as much ground with your fast guys.
Yeah.
And I don't know, he must not play a lot of defense, and then to make his one shining moment, a game clinching interception in an upset. That's storybook stuff right there.
Yeah. Well, I give him huge credit because, I mean, not only to come up with the interception, but just the reaction time to not let that ball bounce off your chest, because it was such a wild throw that was so unexpected for him to just be able to corral it. I guess that's why they had him on the field. He was an athlete, with the skills to get the job done. So Nicholas, his song ends up with, do you have his numbers on the game, Mitch?
Yeah. So he ended up 32 carries for 224 yards and 2 TDs. And then it was on that drive that you mentioned that ended in a fumble. It was around 4 minutes left.
Yeah.
Ends up, he didn't have the ball. It was a non-contact play. And unfortunately we're going to know how that ends up a lot anymore these days. It did confirm that he did tear his ACL. Didn't dampen his spirits one bit. He had done all the damage already. And he could have cared less once the final was there. But what a performance he had done. Again, 224 yards in the game.
So I think he did get hurt on a play where he was running the ball, and he tried to stay in. He got up and kind of walked very slowly back to the huddle. Yeah. But I think in the moment he was trying to stay in the game. And on the next play, you could tell that something wasn't right. Okay. And, that was, even watching the game with no stakes, you just had that sinking feeling like, oh man, don't tell me that, he's going to go down with injury, and then East St. Louis is going to come back and score. And just that, that gut feeling of like, oh, that would be a really ugly way to lose for Cary Grove.
Yeah.
Obviously it was a great game. East St. Louis certainly, would have been deserving of the victory, but you just felt good for his song and for the rest of the team that wasn't the defining, end moment of him getting hurt and they lost the game. They held on to win it. So credit to Cary Grove. It was just a great game. Just, really fun to watch.
Yeah. Widely praised as maybe the greatest state championship football games in Illinois history. So if you have a chance, if you have some time to find a replay of that game or find the highlights, do yourself a favor and find them, because this was a lot of fun, and congrats to Cary Grove.
Yeah. Several other quick notes in the articles that I had read. I was watching the game, and at one point Cary Grove lined up like they were going to go for a 4th down, fairly, I think, in their own territory.
Yeah.
And it was in the second half of the game, I believe.
Yes, it was.
And they lined up, and then East St. Louis actually called a timeout. They came back out, and Cary Grove stayed in the same formation as if they're going for it. And I give credit to Cary Grove's coaching staff for kind of just, kind of outmaneuvering, outthinking East St. Louis, because East St. Louis's personnel was, I think, in a state of confusion, because the quarterback dropped back for Cary Grove, who's also their punter. East St. Louis has no one back waiting to receive the punt, that being what would have been Burden, who was not on the field at the time. The punt takes a great bounce on the turf, goes 62 yards. So just kind of just a way to catch East St. Louis off guard and make sure the Burden wasn't in the game to do the damage as a punt returner. And it proved out to be huge, a huge turn of momentum and a huge, field shifter for Cary Grove. They also had a big conversion, I believe, on a 4th down and 17. They had a pass play that converted on a 4th down and 17. So just, a reading post game afterwards, Cary Grove's coaches said they had to call a perfect game. They knew that they had to get everything right. And for the most part, man, I think they did. I think they came pretty darn close to calling a perfect game, and their athletes were there to execute.
Yeah, they had to play chess in a checker match. You're playing in East St. Louis, and they did it to perfection. So again, kudos to them, and that was a great game.
Well, Mitch, let's start going through the list then. We'll go back to Class 2A. I was there for half of this game, but I'll be honest, I really didn't have a chance to watch it because I was in the middle of doing interviews and kind of finishing up our coverage of Lena-Winslow. Yeah. So, Mitch, I'll let you take over here. Read through. Wilmington gets the 24-7 win over Nashville. What do we see in this one?
Yeah, this was a game that, Wilmington really ran their wishbone offense to perfection in terms of ball control. We saw them put up a lot of points in the playoffs. Nashville kind of slowed them down, but they were still able to execute pretty well. But really what won this game for Wilmington was a really stout defense. The Nashville team, they had over 5,000 yards of offense in the season up to that point, regular season plus the playoff game. The Wilmington defense held them to just 107 yards and also blocked a punt along the way. So they really held this game in check against the Hornets. At one point late in the game, Wilmington's main running back, Jacob Friddle, had 30 carries. And at the time, that was 2 more than Nashville had total plays. So I don't know how that ended, if that stat held true. But I know that it was late in the fourth. They ran that stat across the broadcast there, that he alone had ran more plays than the entire Nashville team did. So Wilmington, they were number 1 for a lot of the season, undefeated. A well-deserved state championship here.
Yeah. So, Mitch, this Wilmington team, like you said, that wishbone offense that they run to perfection. I mean, they don't pass the ball a whole lot because they don't need to. Same recipe that Lena-Winslow used for a state championship game and for a state championship victory. And let's go down into Class 3A.
Yeah.
Byron,
Right. That was really I'm looking at the games really all the way through almost is how that went. And we'll get to that here. Other than the 7A game where they passed a lot, every other game was run heavy. But yeah, 3A, another local-ish team that we have some ties to. Byron, this was their 3rd straight 3A state championship appearance. They had lost their 2 previous tries, both by 4 points. And then even coming into this game, they had won their quarterfinal and their semifinal game in the last 10 seconds. Both games in the last 10 seconds. Obviously, the big one in the semifinal against IC Catholic. Didn't need any of those heroics in this one. This one was over pretty early. Ethan Paulskill, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. He was all over the field. He had 4 touchdowns. He was running. He was receiving. He was all over for them and just helped that offense roll to 437 yards of offense as a team. And they win 35-7. Unfortunately for Tolono, a great year. This was their 6th championship appearance. They have finished runner-up in all 6 tries.
Yeah, that's tough. We talked about it in the game preview that something had to give here. The Tolono Unity was looking for a state championship, and Byron was looking for one after losing 2 in a row. Byron comes away with the win, and huge credit to Byron, man. They were a good team, all year, obviously, but to win the way they did the last 2 weeks to get to this state championship game, I mean, just what a playoff run.
Well, Greg, I look no further than what they were wearing that night.
Yes.
Because they looked great. I'm going to have to try and remember our picks here. But I think one of us, I took Byron because or maybe I took Tolono. I really don't remember. But anyway, Byron.
I believe I took Tolono Unity and you took Byron. So,
okay.
Yep.
And Byron came out in their all black uniform, which I think we both agreed was their best look. So,
yep.
Yeah, that one held true. So they looked good, played good, and here they are with a 3A championship.
Well, and as long as we're on the uniform topic, Mitch, the home team, the quote unquote, the team wearing the colored jersey, the home colors, they did very well this weekend.
Undefeated, yeah. And really, and I guess I learned this too. 7A and 8A don't do north and south.
Yeah, they do straight 1 through 32. Yep.
It's mostly Chicago or bigger schools. But anyway, 1 through 6, all the North bracket teams won, which happened to be the home teams, and then it happened in the same classes for 7A and 8A. So yeah, a little interesting nugget, I guess. So pretty cool to see.
All right, well, Mitch, let's move into Class 4A. Joliet Catholic Man, Joliet Catholic. What else do you have to say about them? They looked real good. 56-27. They get the win over Sacred Heart Griffin. I was able to watch a little bit of this one. But man, tell me about Jordan Anderson.
Yeah. So Joliet Catholic has, and this again would go into the unboundary school discussion. But Juliet Catholic may or may not be an exception to that because they've won so many and they've won it in now 3 different classes. But they have 2 players going to Illinois. One, their running back, Jordan Anderson. They've got a linebacker. I believe his name is Malachi Hood, I think. But Jordan Anderson, I don't know his stats in terms of how much or how tall he is and how much he weighs. Head and shoulders above and beyond any player on Sacred Heart's defense. It looks like, a high schooler playing in a junior tackle game almost, just how big he was and how good he was. It's obvious he's going to Illinois. Rushed for a record 306 yards. That was a record for a 4A state championship game. He had 4 touchdowns on the ground. He also had 69 yards receiving and a touchdown.
Oh, geez.
He was everywhere. They also have another running back that really set their attack in motion. And I'm going to try and do this on the fly. Vinny Iannatone.
Okay, yeah, looks good.
Iannatone is, I believe, how that's pronounced. Really a strong fullback. He had 123 yards. And the Hilltoppers add to their IHSA leading 15th state title. And I don't know if they had won one in 4A prior, but I did look it up. They've won in 4A, 5A, and 6A. So say what you will about the multiplier and maybe playing down this year. It might not have mattered because they would have played in 5A and might have won that one. But just as always, an impressive program at Joliet Catholic. And just really, really good players. I think they threw 9 times and 2 of them were touchdowns.
Yeah. Yep. Well, remember a few years ago when Joliet Catholic was down, but they certainly not for long. They are back now. That program is certainly back on the map. Mitch, early Saturday morning, Class 5A, the best uniform matchup, I think, the best looking game of the weekend. Fenwick gets the 34-15 win. Man, just a great look with Fenwick in the all black uniform and Kankakee in the all white with the black helmet. Man, it was a really good looking game anyway.
So I saw a cool nugget on this, Greg. So that game was on Saturday at 10 a.m.
Yep.
When Fenwick left Oak Park, they stopped at the DeKalb Oasis.
Okay.
And that was around 7 a.m. And the coach, and I don't have his name, instructed his team to just go crazy. Like, just make a bunch of noise. Make the bus rock. He didn't want them showing up to the game and kind of playing asleep. Didn't want them to, try and be, not warmed up. So at 7 a.m., I don't know if they were in the bus or outside the bus, what that sounded like. But at 7 a.m., I think he did it on a whim. I think he just said, hey, we need to pull over quick, and just told them to go nuts. It set the tone for the game, and they come out with the win, their first one in school history. They were known for a passing attack. They've got a quarterback who's going to Ball State, Caden Cobb. Had a good game, 11 of 18 for 146 yards and 3 scores. But maybe they caught the K's off guard a little bit because their running back, Danny Kent, had 31 carries for 212 yards and a touchdown. So, again, normally a really spread out attack. They still showed that, but also did a lot of work on the ground. And again, maybe caught the K's off guard just a little bit, showing that other wrinkle in their dynamic offense. But either way, first state title in program history for Fenwick. So congrats to them.
Yeah, I was watching a little bit of that game Saturday morning, and Caden Cobb looked great. Like you said, Ball State commit. He looked really good. Really cool to see a team, in Fenwick in this one, to see them celebrate their first state title in school history. Cool to see kids kind of acknowledge that moment of like, no one in our school's ever done this. It was fun. A lot of genuine excitement, a lot of fun to watch in that one. Mitch, we already talked about Cary Grove getting the win in 6A. We'll move along to 7 and 8A. 7A, Wheaton North 35-6 over St. Rita. So, Mitch, I'm trying to remember. Let's see. We both took Rita. So we
I thought I took Wheaton.
Oh, I misremembered, but
Yeah, we're gonna have to listen back because I don't remember either.
well, either way, Wilmington Wheaton North gets the win on the field. So
yeah, so they get their first state championship since 1986. So a long time coming for the Falcons. St. Rita has an Ohio State bound running back named Caleb Brown. He didn't play all the regular season. He was hurt. Really kind of got into form in the playoffs. But the Falcons held the Mustangs to their lowest point total of the season. So that defense was really on fire all night. It included a scoop and score as time expired in the first half. So really, if the game wasn't out of hand by then, that is just a dagger going into halftime. Falcon quarterback Mark Cucci, I'm going to say, was 14 to 22, 302 yards and 2 touchdowns. So really a little bit different from what we've seen in the other games being ground heavy. The Falcons went to the air and took care of business for this championship.
Yep. So Wheaton North gets the win. And Mitch, in Class 8A, the Lockport Porters, who we learned about what a porter is now. We learned about the Porters this week. Thank you to some of our listeners on Twitter, our Lockport fans helping us out. They get the 24-6 win over Park Ridge, Maine South. 24-6. So a rematch of the 2003 Class 8A state final. This one goes to Lockport.
Yeah. So and Lockport won that one as well. So 18 years later, they're playing again here. So third championship in program history for the Porters. Their running back Ty Schultz, he was over 200 yards, and the Porter defense was strong all night. So yes, I'm going to try and remember this from memory.
Okay. Yes.
Because it's a bit of a redaction from my part because I didn't, 1, know what a porter was, and 2, wasn't sure what their logo was. So Lockport is a canal town, and really it's the Illinois and Michigan Canal that runs through Lockport. And that's really, back in those days was really kind of an indicator of how cities would get established, just being a city that you could dock into. And so a porter was someone who would make sure that the cargo would get on or off ships. And so their helmet, if you remember, has a logo that we assumed was a ship, but we just wasn't sure what orientation we were looking at it.
Yes.
It's as if you were looking at a barge face on.
And I actually said that. I thought it looked like a ship from the front. Okay. So I kind of had that half right. Yeah.
Yeah. I was wrong in this entire discussion. And then obviously that ties into the anchor on the back and the chain link going up the middle of the helmet. So yeah, we did get a history lesson there. They're very proud. They're very proud of their history there in Lockport for good reason. So congrats to them once again on your third state championship in program history and taking care of Maine South in this one, 24-6.
Yeah. So the direct message I had on Twitter.
Yeah.
To provide a little bit more. The porters were the dock hands or the laborers who would pull the ships or the barges through the lock system in the canal. They were described as tough, rowdy, blue-collar guys. So, that is a porter. And yes, it's a front-facing ship. The logo, that's the design or the way you're looking at it. So, and actually, Mitch, I'm from Ottawa, Illinois, and the I&M Canal goes through Ottawa. So I was familiar with the canal when he brought it up. So
there you go. Wonderful.
Yeah. So Mitch, that'll do it. That'll put a wrap on the 2021 football season. We've talked a lot about a lot of teams and a lot of players and a lot of games, and it's been fun.
Yeah, it was really it all kind of ended the way that we had hoped it would. One, obviously having a state champion in our region. And 2, like you kind of referenced earlier, just getting to this point, getting back to some normalcy, getting kids back on the field, competing for state championships. Great to see. It was a great 2 days full of action. Thanks to our friends on Twitter, Destination DeKalb for all their help in hosting, obviously at NIU for being a great host to the state championships. So all around a great weekend celebrating Illinois football.
Yep. So Mitch, that will wrap up the regular season, but we're not done yet. We already teased it a little bit earlier. We're going to take a bye week next week. We'll come back. We're looking at maybe December 14th. That'll be the day that we'll drop the podcast, our Best from the West awards, our 2021 football season awards. Yep. We'll go through, all the usual awards, the best player, best game. We'll come up with some different categories. We haven't finalized anything yet.
Yeah, we did this in the spring. I don't remember what our superlatives were.
Yes.
But yeah, we'll definitely be talking about team of the year, player of the year, game of the year. And maybe we'll think of some other things that we'll talk about. But yeah, we'll while we're done talking about games, we'll wrap the season up one more time with that episode, and that'll be a lot of fun to kind of reminisce about things that we saw, and either highlights or players that we liked. So yeah, looking forward to that.
Yep. So a week off, and then that'll be on December 14th, and that'll probably wrap us up for our coverage through the actual year 2021.
Yeah.
But Mitch, I think it's safe to say for me and for you, we're not going anywhere. We'll still be around. Mitch, you're always on Twitter. You'll be on Twitter throughout the off season. So
yeah, and I don't know that we're going to talk about this on this show, but there's a lot of news already going with conference realignments and teams and things like that. So there's always going to be news in the off season that we're always going to stay on top of. You never know what's going to happen. If a team's going to go to 8-man, if a team's going to go into a new conference, maybe someone comes up with a new helmet. I don't know. Send it to us. We'll be on top of it.
Well, and speaking of that, we said we're not going anywhere. We'll still have some episodes in the off season. Mitch, we've already talked about it a long time ago on the podcast, but I think you're in for a helmet or Uniview helmet challenge here.
Yeah, I think so. We did one for uniforms throughout all the conferences, and then we tied it all together to get our favorites. Which still, congrats to Orion as the reigning champs of that.
Yep.
And probably will be until a lot of teams get uniforms because there won't be any reason to do it again. But we can still have separate ratings. I think we could do a best helmet.
Oh yeah,
in the area, because those are different rankings. Those are different rankings. It does not mean that the team that won best uniform is going to win best helmet, because they are different. There are teams that have good helmets and bad uniforms, and vice versa. So yeah, that would be a fun way to kind of talk about uniforms in the off season.
I can't wait. I'm already scouting pictures on Google. We're gonna have some fun with that. We got to figure out who the best helmet is. So that'll be an off season project for sure. But Mitch, thank you so much for once again joining me. Thank you so much for being all over Twitter, for keeping our Twitter peeps informed and up to date on all the uniforms and the numbers and the final scores. I appreciate your efforts.
Yeah, well, and one, when we started this back earlier this year, I remember we were getting excited that we had 10 followers, and now we're almost at 900, which again is so much fun to see. It keeps the spirit alive. So thank you to this was your idea, so it was great that you did this. Thanks to everyone from the Score who helps us out, to all the local media, that we've met along the way, or that we kind of collab with. But most of all, thank you to all the fans of the teams and the players and the coaches who listen, have been open to interviews in that nature. So makes this a lot of fun to do, and we'll be coming back ready to go.
That's right. So thank you to everyone who listens. Like Mitch said, we really appreciate everybody who listens in, joins in on Twitter. Stay tuned. December 14th, we'll be back with an updated episode, and we'll be talking about the best from the West, all the awards from this past football season. A great season it was. Thank you so much. We'll see you then. That'll do it for this week's episode of View from the West. Thank you so much for listening. I encourage you to go out to Apple Podcasts or Podbean and subscribe so you can follow along, and downloads will come automatically every week. You can follow along on Twitter at ViewFromWestPod. You can also email me if you're interested in being a sponsor, viewfromwestpod@gmail.com.